Hello everyone, I'm Tin Bejar of by Tin B, and welcome to my Wildflowers workshop series in partnership with Shatner Paper. In this class, we'll be painting a lovely selection of wildflowers, including daisies, poppies, daffodils, and black-eyed Susan. The video lessons are actually designed with beginner-friendly techniques, making it easy to follow along whether you're a beginner or an experienced painter. We'll cover essential watercolor methods like wet on dry and graded washes. And each class would include step-by-step guides in painting each wildflower. Here's what you'll need to get started with this class. For the paper, I'm using Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor paper in cold pressed, and I usually work with this kind of paper because cold press is a lovely texture that works really well for botanical subjects. And for the paints, I'm using my Merry Blue watercolors. For the brushes, I'll be using a variety of pincer round brushes along with mini detailers for finer work. Prepare other painting materials like a ceramic palette for preparing washes and mixing colors, and probably 2 cups of water, 1 for rinsing the brushes and 1 with clean water. And lastly, a tissue or a paper towel for controlling water and blotting your brush. Make sure your workspace is comfortable and then you're all set. So this is the artwork that we'll be painting in class. We'll paint these deep red poppies using the glazing technique. And by working in layers, you'll see how each glaze adds depth and vibrancy, bringing these charming wildflowers to life with subtle detail and warmth. Start by making a very light sketch of our poppy illustration. Keep your lines soft and minimal, just enough to guide your painting. This will help the delicate watercolor layers shine through without being overpowered by those pencil marks. We'll start by painting the petals of our poppies. I'll be using my Merry Blue watercolors for this part, specifically Permanent Matter Deep for that rich bold red. So for the petals, we'll work slowly, building up the color using the glazing technique. So don't rush and let each layer dry before adding the next one. This will help create depth and a lovely natural texture in our petals. For the first layer, I'm preparing a very light watery mix of Permanent Matter Deep. Think of it like tea. This transparent wash will act as our base layer. It should flow easily on the paper and give us a soft hint of color. We'll paint the petals using that light tea-like red mixture. Just follow the shape of each petal and fill it in with this transparent wash. Don't worry about details yet, we're just laying down the base color to build on later. And using my Princeton round brush, I'm gonna apply this mixture evenly on my petals. Let this first layer dry completely before moving on with the next glaze. So while the petals are drying, let's focus on the center of the poppy. We'll begin with a very light mixture of yellow for the first layer, creating a soft base for the center. Using the light yellow mixture, gently paint the center of the flower. The first layer should be transparent and delicate, just like we did with the petals. And same with the petals, we need to wait for this layer to dry completely before adding any more details. Next, we'll focus on the leaves. We'll use the graded wash technique here, which will help us create a smooth transition from dark to light along the length of each leaf. This technique allows us to build a gradual gradient by applying pigment at the base of the leaf and letting it fade out toward the tip. And in order to make this work, I'll be using 2 brushes. One small brush for applying the pigment, and another brush for blending it with clean water to create that smooth gradient. So what I'll do is I'm going to apply this thick mixture of Hooker's green at the base of the leaves. Then I'll switch to my clean brush, using it to pull and soften the pigment toward the tip of the leaf, creating that smooth gradient. I'll continue this process for all the remaining leaves in the illustration, making sure each one has a beautiful gradient from dark to light. And for the stems, I'll use a milk-like consistency of Fuchs green with about 50% water and 50% pigment. This will create a nice balanced tone for the stems without being too heavy. Now that the first layer of the petals is completely dry, we're ready to move on with our second layer. So for this layer, we'll use a milk-like consistency, but this time with a bit more paint than our first layer, making it more vibrant and opaque. And as I paint, I'll leave out some thin lines here and there, showing parts of my first layer beneath. This will create more depth in the petals, giving us highlights and midtones for the more natural, dimensional look. To avoid any colors bleeding into each other, I'll continue working on each petal individually. This way, we can maintain clean, crisp edges and control the blending of colors. For our third layer, we're going to focus on adding shadows to bring more depth to the petals. I'll mix up a cream-like consistency again, similar to our second layer, but with a little more pigment for those rich, dark shadow areas. I'll then blend it with water so the shadows transition smoothly, still letting the layers beneath show through. The addition of the shadows will help give the petals more structure and dimension. Actually, for that added structure, pay attention to the areas where the petals overlap because these parts tend to be naturally darker, so adding extra shadow to them will really enhance the sense of form and dimension in your flower. Now we'll focus on the details of the flower center. I'm going to use a tea-like mixture of Vandyke Brown to apply thin, delicate lines that will give texture and detail to the center. Now it's time to add those final details to our petals to really make them pop. I'm mixing red and black to create a deep, rich red that will give us that intense shadow and detail that we need for our final touches. Using my detail brush and its tip, I'll carefully add thin outlines to highlight the structure of the petals. This will help bring out the delicate shapes and folds. I'll add more details to the areas where the petals overlap, creating separations to our flower. To add even more structure to the petals, I'll paint very thin streaks, starting from the center, following the natural flow of each petal. These streaks will mimic the veins and folds of our petals, enhancing their lifelike appearance. I'll tilt my paper slightly. This helps control the flow of the paint and allows smoother, more precise lines. Next, I'll use a cream-like mixture of Vandyke Brown to paint small, subtle circles in the center of the flower. These will help create the rich texture and intricate look of a poppy center. To intensify the color of the leaves, I'll add another layer using the graded wash technique. This will actually deepen the gradients and make the leaves more vibrant and full of life. Once everything is completely dry, I'll gently erase any visible pencil marks using an eraser. This will clean up the illustration and leave the watercolor layers as the main focus. So this is our beautiful poppy flower. We've successfully used the wet and dry technique to bring these wildflowers to life. Thank you so much for following along, and I hope you enjoyed the process. See you in the next video.